This will be our second system of equations video and topic, system of equations substitution. Now we've just finished doing system of equations with graphing, and that meant that we were using graphs to solve for our system of equations. Now we're going to learn another way to solve for system of equations. Note that if you did a problem using graphing and a problem using substitution, you would get the same answer. It's just two different tools to accomplish the same task. First, I want to go over the idea of substitution. Here I have an expression that you've probably seen before. I have x plus 7, and then I'm telling you x equals 4. And what this means is x is the same as 4. So I can interchange 4 and x. They mean the same thing. So looking back at my expression, I'm going to substitute everywhere I see an x with a 4. So I see an x here in the beginning, and that means I'm going to replace it with a 4. And then I'm going to not change the rest of the expression. So I just end up with 4 plus 7, and that's equal to 11. So let's kick it up a notch. Here I have a system of equations, which means I'm going to solve both equations at the same time. And you'll notice that, again, I have something similar to something that we saw in the last problem. I have x equals something. We saw that before. We had x equals 4, but now we have x equals y plus 4. And we're going to do the same thing that we did in the last problem, where everywhere I see an x, I'm going to replace it with y plus 4. So the only x in the second equation is in the very beginning again. And I'm going to replace that x with y plus 4, and then write out the rest of my equation without changing anything. I have two like terms, y and y. I'll combine those to get 2y plus 4 equals 8. And now I'll solve for y by subtracting 4 from each side. And then dividing by 2. So now that I figured out y equals 2, I figured out another variable. I can use this to substitute again. And every time I see y, I'm going to replace it with a 2. So looking back at one of my original equations, I have x plus, and now I see a y, so I'm going to replace that with a 2 equals 8. I'll subtract 2 from both sides in order to solve for x, and I get x equals 6. So my final answer as an ordered pair or a coordinate point would be parentheses 6, 2. Here I have another system of equations, but notice I don't have any x equals or y equals. So that means I'm going to have to solve for those using my given equations. I'm going to use this equation to solve for x. And now I could solve for x or y, or I could use either equation. This is just the choice I'm making. I see that there are no coefficients for x and y here, and that lets me know that if I have to do any division, it's going to be easier. So over here, I have x plus y equals 5. And I'm just rewriting the equation right now, and I want to solve for x. So I'm trying to get x equals something. So I'm going to subtract y from both sides to get x isolated, so I get x on its own side of the equal sign all by itself. And I get x equals 5 minus y. And this looks familiar. We just dealt with this on the last page. I have x equals something. So I'm going to look at my other equation, and everywhere I see an x, I'm going to replace it with 5 minus y. Here's the only x in that equation. So I have 2 times 5 minus y. Again, I'm just replacing x and rewriting the rest of the equation without changing anything. I'll distribute the 2. I get 10 minus 2y plus y equals 8. Simplify by combining minus 2y plus y to get 10 minus y equals 8. I'll solve for y by adding, by subtracting 10 from both sides. I get minus y. Notice I kept that minus sign, equals minus 2. And now to undo a minus y, I divide by negative 1. Since a negative divided by a negative is a positive and anything divided by 1 is itself, I end up with y equals 2. I'm again going to substitute. I have y equals, and then the number 2. So I'm going to go back into this equation. I have 2x plus, and now I run into my first y, so I'm going to change that to a 2, equals 8. 2x, I'll subtract 2 from both sides, equals 6. Divide by 2 on both sides. X equals 3. Which means if I were to write my answer as an ordered pair, I would get 3, 2. And that's everything you need to know about solving systems of equations with substitution. If you have any questions, as always, send me an email or come in during tutorial or after school or ask in class.